In our world today, so many weapons exist that we can no longer keep count of them. However, among these many weapons, very few, if any, hold the same destructive power as one created by a brilliant mind in the 20th century. In this episode, we take you on a journey through the life of j.Robert Oppenheimer, from his childhood to his pivotal role in developing the most destructive weapon known to humanity. As we journey through his life story, we will be left with a valuable lesson on the profound impact our decisions can have. It all began on April 22, 1904, when Oppenheimer was born in the bustling city of New York. His father, Julius Oppenheimer, was a successful textile merchant who had migrated from Germany. On the other hand, his mother, Ella Friedman, came from a prosperous Jewish household. Both parents valued education and, as such, gave young Oppenheimer access to so many things that aided his intellectual stimulation while growing up. Unsurprisingly, Oppenheimer's brilliance began to sparkle during his school years. At the ethical culture Fieldston School in New York, he dazzled everyone with his smarts. Math and science were his playgrounds, and he tackled them with such enthusiasm that it was clear there was something extraordinary about this young mind. In 1922, Oppenheimer embarked on a whole new adventure, his undergraduate studies at Harvard University. Picture him diving headfirst into a kaleidoscope of subjects, from chemistry to physics and even philosophy. He was like a kid in a candy store, devouring knowledge and never getting enough. His thirst for understanding set him miles apart from his peers, and he once again left everyone in awe of him. Shortly after graduating from Harvard, the allure of Europe and its promise of further education called out to Oppenheimer, who had just begun his early 20s. In 1925, he made his way to the University of Cambridge in England, where he spent a year in the Cavendish Laboratory, learning under the eminent physicists J.J. Thomson and Patrick Blackett. That experience, let's just say it was like opening the doors to a world of wonders. Oppenheimer witnessed the creme de la creme of laboratory research, which coincided with a time when more renowned physicists like Max Planck, Albert Einstein, and Niels Bohr were at the cutting edge of creating new theories in the field of quantum mechanics. Impressed by what they had achieved, Oppenheimer realized that his talent in physics was not in the laboratory, but with paper and pencil, making theoretical calculations. He began to immerse himself in this new world, gathering knowledge that would later be essential for the development of the atomic bomb. Returning to the United States, Oppenheimer pursued his PhD in physics at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, which he completed in 1927. From there, he embarked on a teaching career, dedicating himself to research and collaborating with students on their projects. These were highly productive years for Oppenheimer, as he pioneered groundbreaking experiments and made significant contributions to the field of science. However, as his influence within the scientific community grew, his name started circulating within military circles. This was a time when the world was engulfed in war, with conflict raging in Europe and the Pacific. In 1942, Oppenheimer was recruited by U.S. Army General Leslie R. Groves to become the scientific head of the top-secret Manhattan Project. This project was the United States' ambitious undertaking to develop a nuclear weapon. It was a race against Germany, also known to be deeply involved in similar research. The goal was to be the first nation to possess the most devastating weapon in history. For 3 intense years, Oppenheimer worked alongside a team of brilliant scientists and engineers, striving to create fissionable material, the core component of the atomic bomb. Their hard work paid off, and in July 1945, they successfully tested the first nuclear nuke at the Trinity Test site in Alamogordo, New Mexico. This moment profoundly impacted Oppenheimer, and he lately described it with a line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds." It was a sobering realization that the weapon he helped create had the power to bring unimaginable destruction. Not only did Oppenheimer and his team successfully test the atomic bomb, but they also developed 2 other types, a uranium-based design called the Little Boy and a plutonium-based weapon, known as the Fat Man. At this time, the war in Europe had already come to an end in April, but the conflict with Japan persisted, causing significant casualties for the US. The devastating attack on Pearl Harbor stood as a haunting reminder of the immense toll of the war. So, in late July, President Harry Truman, confident that he now had a nuclear power within his arsenal, called for Japan's surrender with the Potsdam Declaration. The declaration promised prompt and utter destruction if Japan did not surrender, but this was ignored by the Japanese, who thought that they had the upper hand. On August 6, 1945, a bomber plane from the United States dropped the first atomic bomb on a live target, known as the city of Hiroshima, Japan. The little boy blew up with about 13 kilotons of force, completely obliterating 5 square miles of the city. 80,000 people died within seconds, and a similar number would later die from radiation exposure. When the Japanese did not immediately throw in their arms, the United States dropped a second atomic bomb on the city of Nagasaki 3 days later. The Fat Man wiped out an estimated 40,000 people on impact. Faced with the shocking aftermath, Japanese Emperor Hirohito realized that Oppenheimer's creation, whom he did not know of at the time, had changed the tide of the war. He announced his country's surrender on August 15th, ending World War II, which had lasted for about 6 years. As details of the horrific destruction reached the Manhattan Project scientists, many began questioning their actions. In late October, Oppenheimer visited President Harry S. Truman, who had okayed using both bombs, to talk to him about placing international controls on nuclear weapons. Truman, worried about the prospect of Soviet nuclear development, dismissed him. It was said that Oppenheimer had told Truman that he felt compelled to act because he had blood on his hands. But the then president retorted, "The blood is on my hands. Let me worry about that." For years, Oppenheimer continued to live with his guilt. His creation had killed so many people, far faster than any weapon in the World War had done. And even though he was greatly praised in the scientific and military circles, he couldn't stop thinking about how much havoc he had wreaked. Much later, he took steps to prevent a similar nuclear war from happening in the future. He began working with the US Atomic Energy Commission to control the use of nuclear weapons, and in 1949, when Truman approached the commission about creating a hydrogen bomb, Oppenheimer opposed it, seemingly wanting to avoid a repeat of the past with a much greater weapon. Despite his opposition, the US developed a HBomb and tested it in 1952, although it was never used on a live target. However, Oppenheimer's resistance ended up costing him his job. During the Senator Joseph McCarthy era, the government stripped him of his security clearance, citing his opposition to the hydrogen bomb and his purported communist ties. Rather than accept the decision and its apparent implications of disloyalty, he chose the option of a secret hearing before a special appeals board. The trial went on for nearly 2 months in 1954, with numerous distinguished scientists and public servants coming to testify in favor of Oppenheimer. The committee ultimately decided that Oppenheimer's loyalty was not in doubt. However, they pointed out that his left-wing association in the 1930s while still a young student made him an ill fit to be trusted with the nation's official secrets. Regardless of the outcome of the appeal, the harm had already been done. Oppenheimer retreated into solitude in St. John, Virgin Islands. He no longer pursued research, which he had dedicated the best years of his life to. Instead, he developed a new interest in sailing, enjoying this pastime with his wife, Catherine. The scandal surrounding Oppenheimer's security clearance continued to haunt him even in his absence. Speculations about his alleged involvement as a Soviet spy persisted for decades, until he died in 1967 from throat cancer. Today, both Hiroshima and Nagasaki have undergone significant reconstruction. Memorials and educational centers stand in these cities to honor the victims and raise awareness about the devastating consequences of nuclear warfare. Although many other battles have occurred since then, no country has dared to use nuclear weapons. The world collectively recognized the need to prevent the use of these weapons and to strive for disarmament and peaceful resolutions to conflicts. Meanwhile, Oppenheimer is now mainly remembered as a scientist who was persecuted for trying to address the moral problems of his creation, a brilliant mind whose genius became the bane of his existence.